Today, we explore 5 more stories of individuals whose deaths were both unexpected and bizarre. From odd accidents to strange mishaps, these cases reveal how life can end in the most surprising and unusual ways. Stay tuned as we delve into these strange yet true stories. It was a quiet night in Caratinga, a small town in southeastern Brazil. João Maria de Souza, a 45-year-old man, was sleeping peacefully in his bed alongside his wife Leni. The couple lived in a home situated at the base of a steep hill. Life was simple and uneventful, until July in 2013, when an unimaginable and bizarre incident would change everything. João and Leni had gone to bed as usual. Little did they know that a 1-ton cow, which had escaped from a nearby farm, was wandering around their property. The cow had managed to climb onto the roof of their house. This was not an ordinary roof. It was made of corrugated iron, a material not designed to support the weight of a large animal. As the cow moved, the roof gave way under its weight. Suddenly, the roof collapsed. The massive cow plunged through the ceiling and landed directly on João's side of the bed. The noise was deafening, and the shock was immediate. João's wife, Leni, was jolted awake, but miraculously remained unharmed. The cow, too, escaped without injury. The scene was chaotic. João was pinned beneath the cow, severely injured, but still conscious. He was in immense pain, but he could talk and was aware of what had happened. Emergency services were called, and rescuers arrived promptly. They managed to free João and rushed him to a nearby hospital. He had suffered a fractured left leg, but there were no other visible injuries. It seemed like João would survive this freak accident. As João was being transported, he remained conscious and communicative. His family and rescuers were hopeful, believing that the worst was over. However, their relief was short-lived. At the hospital, João's condition began to deteriorate. Despite being conscious upon arrival, he started experiencing severe internal bleeding. Hours passed, and João was still waiting to be examined by doctors. His family grew increasingly anxious and frustrated with the delay in medical attention. Carlos Correa, João's brother-in-law, expressed his frustration to the HJMD newspaper, stating, "Being crushed by a cow in your bed is the last way you expect to leave this earth. But in my view, it wasn't the cow that killed our João. It was the unacceptable time he spent waiting to be examined." João's mother, Maria de Souza, was devastated. She spoke to Supercanal TV saying, "I didn't bring my son up to be killed by a falling cow. He nearly died when he was 2 and got meningitis, but I worked hard to buy medicines for him, and he survived, and now he's lying in his bed and gets crushed to death by a cow. There's no justice in the world." The local police launched an investigation into the incident. The primary focus was on determining who owned the cow and how it had managed to escape. If the owner could be identified, they could face charges of involuntary manslaughter due to negligence. The civil police of Caratinga, led by Police Chief Ivan Lopez Sales, began questioning João's family and hospital staff to understand the circumstances that led to his death. Photos from the incident show the gaping hole in the roof. Another photo captures the grief-stricken family at João's funeral, standing beside his coffin. The unusual nature of the tragedy left everyone in shock and disbelief. The question of responsibility loomed large. Who owned the cow? How had it escaped? And why had it ended up on João's roof? These were questions that the police needed to answer. The potential charges of involuntary manslaughter will depend on proving negligence on the part of the cow's owner. For João's family, the pain of losing a loved one in such a bizarre manner was made worse by the frustration with the healthcare system. The delay in treatment was, in their eyes, a critical factor in João's untimely death. It raised broader concerns about the quality and efficiency of emergency medical care in the region. It was September 23, 2017, at the Plas Talgarth holiday complex near Machynlleth, Wales. Elizabeth Isherwood, a 60-year-old former policewoman from Wolverhampton, arrived for a week-long stay. This trip was a last visit to the timeshare her family had recently sold. But Elizabeth, known as Mary to friends and family, would never return home. Elizabeth was fit and active, enjoying golf, caring for her grandchildren, and meeting new people through her job as a carer. She had been a policewoman, a teacher, and even worked for the post office before moving to New Zealand and later returning to the UK. This trip was meant to be a peaceful retreat, but it ended in tragedy. On the first night, Elizabeth got up to use the bathroom in her ensuite. She accidentally walked into the airing cupboard, mistaking it for the bathroom. The door handle malfunctioned, trapping her inside. Naked and disoriented, she struggled for hours to free herself. Elizabeth used all her strength to escape. She broke a pipe and used it to try to break through the walls. Unfortunately, the water sprayed from the broken pipe, soaking her and speeding up hypothermia. Despite her struggle, her body temperature dropped dangerously low. Throughout the night and the next day, Elizabeth continued trying to escape. She clawed through brickwork and plaster, making significant progress. She managed to create a hole large enough to climb through, but didn't realize it was blocked by a picture screwed to the other side of the wall. Her cries for help went unheard, or were mistaken for maintenance work by other guests. A neighboring couple heard the banging and considered reporting it if it continued after 5 p.m. Sadly, Elizabeth's efforts ceased just after 5 p.m., leading them to believe it was maintenance workers finishing for the day. Exhausted and drenched, she eventually succumbed to hypothermia. Elizabeth's body was discovered a week later, on the day she was due to check out. Staff found her during an investigation into a water leak. Her clothes and suitcase were untouched, indicating she had never even unpacked. The inquest into her death ruled it as misadventure, concluding she died of hypothermia after becoming trapped. Elizabeth's son Craig and her ex-husband Clive were devastated by the news. They had to inform Elizabeth's grandchildren, Molly and Poppy, of the tragic circumstances. Craig described the conversation as the worst possible one a father could have with his children. The family was left shattered by the loss. Craig decided to take legal action against McDonald Resorts, the owners of the Plas Talgarth complex. He believed the company was negligent in failing to properly maintain the door handle. Craig, represented by Adam Wilson from FBC Manby Bowdler, sought compensation not for money, but to prevent any other family from experiencing a similar tragedy. Adam Wilson stated that the central issue was whether the company was negligent in maintaining the property. He emphasized the horrific nature of the tragedy and the distress Elizabeth must have endured trying to free herself. The legal action aimed to secure compensation for Elizabeth's injuries and the loss of care she provided to her grandchildren. More importantly, it sought to hold the company accountable and prevent future incidents. Craig pointed out that the case wasn't about financial compensation. No amount of money could replace his mother. It was about acknowledging the mistake and preventing future negligence. Elizabeth had been a vibrant and active individual, with many years of happiness ahead of her. Her death was a senseless and avoidable tragedy, one that Craig hoped would lead to changes in how such properties were maintained. Elizabeth Isherwood led a remarkable life. She lived in New Zealand with her partner Rosie before returning to the UK. She took up a part-time job as a carer, which she loved because it allowed her to meet new people and stay active. Her relationship with her ex-husband, Clive, remained good despite their separation almost 30 years ago. They had met in the police force and stayed friends even after Elizabeth came out as gay. Their final meeting for a drink before her trip to Plas Talgarth shows their enduring friendship. Clive and Craig described Elizabeth as a sporty, fit, and healthy woman who adored her grandchildren. The inquest into Elizabeth's death revealed the harrowing details of her final hours. It showed how she fought tirelessly to escape, using a broken pipe to claw through the plasterboard. The constant water spray and her lack of clothing led to the rapid onset of hypothermia, ultimately causing her death. The public's reaction to the case was one of shock and sympathy. Elizabeth's tragic death highlighted the importance of proper maintenance and safety measures in holiday resorts. Many questioned how such a preventable accident could have occurred and expressed support for Craig's legal action. It was January 27, 2018, at Naya Hospital in Mumbai, India. Rajesh Maru, a 32-year-old man from Lalbagh, was there to help his brother-in-law's mother, Laxmi Solanki, who needed an urgent MRI scan for suspected meningitis and pneumonia. Rajesh, concerned but trusting of the hospital staff, had recently started a new job at a clothing shop in Parel and was known for his helpful nature. Rajesh was wheeling Laxmi on a stretcher with his brother-in-law Harish Solanki. Upon reaching the MRI section, the staff instructed them to remove all metallic objects, as the powerful magnetic fields of MRI machines can turn metal objects into dangerous projectiles. However, the situation took a tragic turn when the ward boy, Vital Chavan, asked Rajesh to carry an oxygen cylinder into the MRI room. Rajesh hesitated, aware that metallic objects were not allowed near the machine. He asked if the MRI machine was turned off, but the ward boy reassured him, saying, "This is our daily work, don't worry." Trusting the staff, Rajesh carried the cylinder inside. As Rajesh entered the room, the powerful magnet of the MRI machine, still operational, pulled the metal cylinder with immense force. Rajesh, holding the cylinder, was dragged along, and his hand became trapped. The cylinder's flow meter broke, causing liquid oxygen to leak onto his face. Harish and the ward boy immediately tried to free Rajesh, but it was a struggle. Rajesh's left index finger was severed in the process. Despite their efforts, the excessive inhalation of oxygen proved fatal. Rajesh was rushed to the trauma center, but the medical team could not revive him. By the time they reached the emergency ward, he was already dead. The news of Rajesh's death shocked everyone in the hospital. His father, Galal Maru, was devastated, expressing disbelief and sorrow over the negligence that led to his son's tragic demise. The MRI room had become the scene of a horrific accident. The police quickly got involved, arresting Dr. Saurabh Landrekar, ward boy Vital Chavan, and maid Sunita Surve, charging them under Section 304A of the Indian Penal Code for causing death by negligence. The hospital administration initiated an internal investigation. A team from Philips, the MRI machine manufacturer, along with senior doctors, visited the site to remove the oxygen cylinder and Rajesh's severed finger. In the following days, the family faced additional heartache. Laxmi Solanki, the elderly woman Rajesh was helping, succumbed to her illness. The family, already mourning Rajesh's untimely death, had to cope with another loss. The Maru family's grief just gets worse with time. For Hindu families, it is essential to perform last rites for all body parts of the deceased. Rajesh's severed finger remained stuck in the MRI machine for days, and was later kept at the Kalina Forensic Laboratory for nearly 18 months. The family made countless trips to the hospital and police stations, trying to retrieve the finger to perform the final rites. Finally, on June 20th, 2019, Rajesh's family received his finger from the forensic laboratory. It was an emotional day as they performed the last rites at Waukesha, cremating the finger and scattering the ashes in the water according to Hindu rituals. Rajesh's mother and other family members gathered to bid him a final farewell, hoping to find some peace after what happened. The incident shows serious lapses in hospital safety protocols. Idzis Kundan, the additional municipal commissioner for health, noted that CCTV footage revealed the negligence of the ward boy and attendant. They failed to enforce safety measures, allowing Rajesh to enter the MRI room with the oxygen cylinder. Both staff members were suspended pending further inquiries. Dr. Ramesh Barmal, the hospital superintendent, admitted to being unaware of the preliminary report's findings, but emphasized the need for a thorough investigation. The hospital's MRI machine, which was 7 years old, was out of service until it could be repaired. Patients requiring MRI scans were referred to other BMC-run hospitals. The Agripada police provided a detailed account of the incident. They confirmed that Rajesh's death was caused by excessive inhalation of oxygen. As Rajesh stood between the trolley and the MRI machine, the cylinder was sucked out of the trolley by the magnetic force, dragging Rajesh along. The police officer's statement raised questions about the trolley's material, as it should have also been affected by the magnetic field if it was metallic. The incident caught the attention of local politicians. Member of the Legislative Assembly, MLA, Mangal Prabhat Lodha, announced that Chief Minister Devendra Fadnavis had agreed to provide compensation of 500,000 Indian rupees, or almost $6,000, to Rajesh's family. However, the family later claimed that the promised compensation was not paid. It was an ordinary day in Massachusetts in 2019. A 54-year-old construction worker, whose name remains unknown, was having lunch at a fast food restaurant. He had always had a sweet tooth, often indulging in various candies. But his recent obsession with black licorice turned out to be a fatal choice. This is the unsettling story of how his love for candy led to his untimely death. The construction worker had a history of poor dietary habits. His meals primarily consisted of several packages of candy daily. For years, he had a particular liking for red fruit-flavored twists. However, 3 weeks before his death, he switched to black licorice. This seemingly minor change had catastrophic consequences. Black licorice contains glyceric acid, a compound derived from licorice root. This acid can cause a significant drop in potassium levels in the body, leading to serious health issues. According to Dr. Neil Butala, a cardiologist at Massachusetts General Hospital, even a small amount of licorice can increase blood pressure. But the construction worker's consumption was far from small. He was eating a bag and a half of black licorice every day. On that day, the man was enjoying his lunch when he suddenly began to feel unwell. Witnesses reported that he gasped, started shaking violently, and then lost consciousness. Emergency responders arrived quickly and performed CPR, reviving him briefly before rushing him to the hospital. The medical team discovered that he was experiencing ventricular fibrillation, a life-threatening heart rhythm problem. Despite their best efforts, the man died 32 hours after arriving at the hospital. A study published in the New England Journal of Medicine provided a detailed account of the man's condition. The study revealed that his potassium levels were dangerously low, leading to heart rhythm disturbances. This was directly linked to his excessive consumption of black licorice. Dr. Eliza R. Edelman, a physician mentioned in the study, diagnosed the man with metabolic, renal, vascular and cardiac toxicity due to apparent mineral or corticoid excess from licorice consumption. Essentially, the glyceric acid in the licorice had caused a dangerous buildup of cortisol in his body. This, in turn, led to high blood pressure, metabolic alkalosis, fatal heart arrhythmias, and kidney failure. The man's health was already compromised before his black licorice addiction. He had been a heavy smoker, consuming a pack of cigarettes a day for 36 years. Additionally, he had a history of heroin use disorder and untreated hepatitis C. These pre-existing conditions likely made his body more vulnerable to the toxic effects of the licorice. This tragic incident is not an isolated case. In 2017, the U.S. Food and Drug Administration issued a warning about the dangers of glycyrrhizin, the sweetening compound found in black licorice. The FDA cautioned that eating as little as 2 ounces of black licorice a day for 2 weeks could lead to heart rhythm problems, particularly for individuals over 40. It was November 3rd, 2014, in Jersey City, New Jersey. Gary Anderson, a 58-year-old delivery man from Summerdale, had a routine job that day, delivering drywall to a high-rise construction site. He worked for George Hildebrandt Incorporated, a trucking company based in New York. The construction site was filled with activity as 2 50-story residential towers and an attached hotel were being built on Christopher Columbus Drive. It was a typical day for Gary, but it would soon turn into a tragic one. Gary was known as a diligent worker. He had been with his company for a long time and was well regarded by his colleagues. His truck, marked with "Owned by God," was parked at the site as he prepared to deliver the sheetrock. Gary had a hard hat, but it was left in his car that morning. Around 9 a.m., Gary was standing near his truck, talking to another worker who was inside a pickup truck. Unbeknownst to Gary, high above him on the 50th floor, a construction worker was fiddling with a tape measure. The worker was preparing a wall for windows when the 1-pound tape measure became dislodged from his belt. The tape measure slipped from his hands and began its descent. The tape measure fell nearly 500 feet, gaining speed and momentum. According to City College professor Robert Alfano, by the time it reached the construction site below, it was traveling at nearly 140 miles per hour. The tape measure first struck a piece of construction equipment about 10 to 15 feet above the ground, bouncing off it before hitting Gary in the head. Gary, who was leaning into the truck window to speak with his colleague, was struck as he pulled his head out. The impact was immediate and devastating. Gary collapsed to the ground, unconscious. The scene was chaotic, as workers and bystanders rushed to his aid. An ambulance was called, and he was quickly transported to Jersey City Medical Center. Despite the efforts of the medical staff, Gary went into cardiac arrest while being treated. He was pronounced dead from his head injuries at 9:52 a.m., surrounded by his wife and daughters, who had rushed to the hospital upon hearing the news. The news of Gary's death spread quickly through the construction site and beyond. Gary's colleague, who had been speaking with him just moments before the accident, was in shock. "It's very scary," he said. "I had no idea something so small could do so much damage." Juan Bonilla, a worker at a nearby site, supported this statement. "Yeah, it's a little scary. You don't know what's going to happen," he said. Bonilla emphasized the importance of safety gear. "Absolutely. I think he would have been hurt. Maybe in the hospital, but it would have probably saved his life," he said, referring to the hard hat that Gary had left in his car. A former construction worker near the site insisted on the importance of wearing a hard hat. "You don't work in this environment without a hard hat," he said. "He paid the price. You gotta have it." However, even with a hard hat, Gary's chances of surviving such an impact were slim. The speed and force at which the tape measure fell made it a lethal projectile. The Occupational Safety and Health Administration was called in to investigate the accident. Their investigation would likely focus on the circumstances that led to the tape measure falling, and whether all safety protocols were being followed at the site. OSHA's role is to ensure workplace safety and prevent such tragic accidents from happening. The construction site was temporarily shut down following the accident, and workers were sent home. The site belonged to AJD Construction, and neither the construction company nor the trucking firm, George Hildebrandt Incorporated, would comment on the incident. The development project was being undertaken by Panepinto Properties and Iron State Development, who also refrained from making any statements. Gary's death was not only a blow to his family, but also to his colleagues and the broader construction community. His colleagues remembered him as a hard-working and religious man. One worker mentioned that Gary had been telling a story and had uttered the words, "God is good," just before the accident.